Let me start by just asking you a question, just straight up. Do you think you're rich? Go ahead, you got to answer the question. I'm going to answer it too. That's the question. Are you rich? I decided to answer that question based on where I live in Naperville, and here is what I found out.
Are you rich? Right now, where you sit. Are you rich? When you look around, you may not feel so rich. But what if we looked a little further than our own backyard? Here in Naperville, the median yearly income is around $120,000. That's not Bill Gates rich, but how does it compare with the rest of the world? Turns out, we're rich, in the top 0.06% of the world's wealth. But that's just the median. What if I made only $17,000 a year? Look at that. At $17,000 a year, you're still in the top 5% of the richest people in the world. So if you can see this right now, maybe on a computer or in a weekend service, if you have a car, a house, or an apartment, if you eat out at least once a week, yep, you're rich. We're rich. And it's time to start acting like it.
Now, what we just found out is that almost no matter where you live in the U.S., you're probably somewhere between the top 5% and the top 0.5% of the richest people in the entire world. Now, whether you've seen that before or if it's new information for you here, I'm just kind of curious. After seeing that and hearing that, do you feel like you agree with the statement, I'm rich? I'm not asking, technically, is it accurate? But I want to know, do you feel like I am rich? That describes you. And if you agree, go like, yeah, I do. Or if you're going like, no, I have never, just go like this. I've never felt like I was rich. You see, I think it's one thing for a bunch of statistics to tell us that compared to the rest of the world we're rich, but it is a whole other thing to move to a place where we actually go like, no, we every day feel, like we are. And in fact, I would tell you, I don't think I've ever met a single person who referred to themselves as rich or as wealthy. I mean, maybe I heard a professional athlete or an entertainer on TV, but other than that, I've never known anybody who described themselves by saying, yeah, I'm wealthy. Yeah, I'm really rich. And I don't think it's just because it's not socially acceptable to say it. I think it's because we have such a narrow definition of rich, a narrow definition of wealthy, that nobody really thinks they're rich. Nobody really thinks they're wealthy. Way back in the day, John D. Rockefeller, richest man in the entire world, he was still working. He was making tens of millions of dollars every year. A reporter asked him, Mr. Rockefeller, how much money do you need? He just smiled and said, just a little bit more. Today we're starting a brand new series. This is going to be a great series called Be Rich. And I think it's important for us to know that if we reject the reality of how much we have compared to the rest of the world, it will actually keep us, think about this, keep us from experiencing something vitally important that can change the quality of our lives for the better forever. That this whole Be Rich series is based on this one command that God gives us in the Bible. And if we will embrace it, if you and I will embrace it, we can become, I would say, rich beyond our wildest dreams. How's that sound to you? You could be rich beyond your wildest dreams. And don't you tell me, oh, I don't want to be rich, I really just want to be comfortable or financially secure. Because I'm convinced those are just nice ways of saying, I want to be rich. So here it is. In the words that could change our lives forever, make us rich beyond our wildest dreams, comes to us from 1 Timothy chapter 6, starting in verse 17. And here's what God's word says. It says this, command those who are rich in this present world not to be arrogant, nor to put their hope in wealth, which is so uncertain, but put their hope in God, who richly provides us with everything for our enjoyment. Command them to do good, to be rich in good deeds, and to be generous and willing to share. In this way, they'll lay up treasures for themselves as a firm foundation for the coming age, so they may take hold of the life that is truly life. All right, there is so much good stuff here. I mean, it's almost like you don't know where to start. But I think I know exactly where I want to start. Here's where I want to start. I want to start with these words. Command those who are rich. Okay, we got to get this. If I think I'm not rich compared to the rest of the world, then I think, then these words aren't for me. I begin to think, these words are only for people with last names like Trump or Kardashian, or Buffett. If we think rich in this present world only means people who drive Lamborghinis, people who wear Rolexes, people who take extravagant vacations and have, millions or bazillions of dollars, then we're going to think, you know what? This here in 1 Timothy 6, somehow, at some level, we're going to go, this isn't really for me. But let it rattle your cage a little bit. What we just saw tells us the truth of where we stand regarding wealth, that we are, I am, you are, we are rich in this present world. We don't like to be reminded of it, but we need to be, because the truth is the vast majority of the people in this present world, they have virtually nothing compared to those of you that are listening to me. The vast majority of the people in this present world, they live hand to mouth, just hoping to survive. See, here's the truth. If you have a place to live, you have electricity, you have indoor plumbing, and you don't have to worry about having enough food for your next meal, if that's us, we're rich. Even if you're in so much debt that your net worth is zero, just basically zero, if you have a roof over your head, food on your table, if you have a computer, in this present world, as the Bible describes it, we're rich. Now, here's the deal. I promise. The reason we're saying this is not to make you feel guilty because of, starving children in Africa or whatever guilt trip or sales pitch often comes after hearing something like this. It's not to make anybody who's not in poverty feel bad. It's so that we can hear something good, so you can hear the opportunity. It's so that you can learn how to be really rich, truly rich, as the Bible describes, genuinely wealthy. I want you to look at what it says next here. What it says next says, in this way, they will lay up treasures for themselves as a firm foundation for the coming age, so they may take hold of the life that is truly life. It says this is about laying up a real treasure, a treasure and a wealth that will last, so we can take hold of life. I love that phrase, life that is truly life. I don't know about you, but that sounds good to me. I want that. I want a life that's truly life. I don't want to spend my life trying to take hold of life that's not truly life, right? I want the real thing, the best possible thing. Do you? And look where it says for us to start if we want to be really rich. And it says this. Here's where you start. Be rich in good deeds. Be rich in good deeds. Now, I don't know if you saw the story in the news recently. The story about a woman who recently won the second largest jackpot in U.S. history. Her name was Gloria McKenzie. She was 84 years old, lives down in Florida, and she just won, are you ready for this? She won $590 million. And she won it by buying the winning Pick Quick ticket in her local grocery store. But did you know that she bought it after another lottery player was kind enough to let her go in front of her in line? Somebody did their good deed for the day, and it cost them over $500 million. The first line in the story of a local newspaper read this, said somewhere someone is kicking themselves for being nice to a little old lady. Now, I know this is kind of overstated way of putting it, but what if it's true? What if it's true that the richest person in that supermarket that day wasn't the lottery winner, but was actually the person who let her go in front of her? What if that's true? Or put another way, what if being rich in good deeds is better than actually being rich in dollars? Well, Jesus told this story to kind of help us make sense of all this and kind of grapple with all this, and it's the story of the Good Samaritan. The story of the Good Samaritan was first told to a guy who came to Jesus, and he was asking Jesus about eternal life. Well, in the conversation, the guy talked about God's two greatest commandments of loving God and loving people. Now, on the surface, this sounds very familiar, but in practice, okay, and that's where I want to go today, in practice this becomes very challenging because these two commands, loving God, loving people, are inextricably kind of tied together. And I think Jesus would say that you cannot do one without the other. I mean, how can we show love to God? Sure, there's spiritual practices we can participate in. We can go to church, we can read our Bible, we can give an offering, but those kind of things, those kind of practices can be done half-hearted. The best practical way to demonstrate that we love God is by loving other people, because it shows that we care about the things God cares about most, and that's people. So what he does, in order to drive home this point, right, Jesus tells us maybe his most famous parable. This guy's walking from Jerusalem to Jericho, and it's this treacherous kind of winding road that's full of rocks and caves that were perfect for thieves to hide in. And in the first century, this pass from Jerusalem to Jericho was actually named the Pass of Blood. The Pass of Blood because of the brutality that travelers often came across and experienced as they dared to kind of take this route. So it wasn't surprising for the listeners to hear that there was this wounded traveler in Jesus' story, and he'd been beaten and he'd been left for dead by robbers. Well, the first two to pass by, the wounded man, were both professional religious guys, a priest and a Levite. They were responsible for religious duties. They were responsible for the ceremonies in the temple. They had a job to do. They were very busy guys. And as kind of a professional, I guess, religious guy myself, I find it hard to be too hard on them because I know there's times when I find myself, at least I think, too busy, maybe even to help. But I think it's important to note that these two went on their way performing religious duties for God rather than doing what God cares most about, and that's loving people. Well, then there comes another guy that he just called him a Samaritan. Now, to a person in Jesus' culture, the term Good Samaritan, that would have been like an oxymoron, just a total contradiction. Though very closely related ethnically, the Jews and the Samaritans, they hated each other's guts. I was trying to think of some comparisons. Maybe the best comparison we have in our day might be the way a North Korean soldier and a South Korean soldier would feel about each other. And I've been to the DMZ, the military zone there, that kind of separates these two countries, and the line guarded by each country. And on this side of the DMZ is North Korea, and then on the other side of the DMZ is South Korea. And actually, I mean, these people are family. So there is there. I mean, and you talk to them, there's a love for each other. There's also, but at the same time, they're also super bitter enemies. And so the twist in the plot is that a Samaritan is the one who stops and helps a Jewish person. I mean, this would have been nothing short of shocking. I mean, people listening go like, what? No way. But the Samaritan does this. The Samaritan takes pity on this wounded Jewish guy. Seeing the man bloodied and beaten and broken down, all of a sudden the walls of kind of deep-seated animosity and prejudice and hate are gone. The Samaritan, he binds up his injured wounds, perhaps, kind of speculating, he maybe takes some of his own clothes to make bandages for him. He pours his own wine on the wounds as kind of a disinfectant to bring about healing. He then also takes some of his own oil and puts it on the wound to soothe the pain. And then he puts the man on his own donkey. And he takes him to a lodge. There he spent his own money for this man's lodging and his food. And please understand, it wasn't because he liked the wounded man. It was because he ran across a man who had a need. The Samaritan loved indeed. The Samaritan in the story was the one who was, as Jesus would describe, rich in good deeds. He was the one that loved God by loving people. Now, if you take a step back in this remarkable story here, we actually encounter two, first of all, familiar kind of philosophies of life. And the first philosophy is, they're barely characters in the story, but they are in the story, the thieves. The thieves who selfishly say, oh, what's yours is mine. You have something and I want it. And some of us, we know what it's like to fall into that kind of a mindset. Oh, they have something. I want that. I want that to be mine. I want to find ways to take that and make it mine. We certainly know people like that. Well, then come the clergy. The clergymen, they, with their kind of self-justification, they say not what's yours is mine, but they say, no, what's mine is mine. It's mine, and I'm keeping it mine. My time, my resources, my stuff is mine. And it's easy for us to fall into that kind of a trap of, me and mine, kind of my family. What's mine's mine. I'll take care of mine. You take care of yours. But here's the radical thing. The Samaritan comes along with this radical alternative, and he says, no, what's mine is yours. What's mine is yours. And the big idea of the story is that Jesus is identifying who is the truly rich person here. Is the one who actually ends up with the most stuff, which is the thieves? Or is it those who kept all their stuff, the clergy, or the one who shared his stuff, the Samaritan? And the Samaritan in the story was the one who Jesus said, no, that's the one who's rich, truly rich, rich in good deeds. Now, before we go too far, don't miss the fact that it was risky for the Samaritan to love the way he loved. And I'm going to challenge you a little bit to do this. And it's going to be risky. I want to just tell you up front, it's going to be risky for you too. Just stopping to help in that crime-ridden neighborhood was dangerous for the Samaritan. Who knows, but he might get robbed too, beat up, left for dead. And even in helping, there were no guarantees. He didn't know this guy. He had no idea if the wounded man would recover. He didn't know if the Jewish guy would be grateful after he recovered if he did recover. And he doesn't know how much it's going to actually ultimately cost him. Because despite all these non-guarantees, what he did do is he put the man in this kind of this lodge or kind of this motel of sorts, and he didn't put any limit on the support he's willing. He just said, no, I want to make sure this guy gets well. I'll come back and check on him from time to time. There were no guarantees. Just love without any kind of strings attached. And this is the kind of love that Jesus is challenging us to live with, the kind of love that's rich in good deeds, like the Samaritan. I remember in college, my friend Scott and I, we were on our way back from Oklahoma to college in Missouri. We picked up a hitchhiker on our way back to school. Hitchhiker gets in the car, and he's telling us his story. He told us how he lost his job. It was kind of a tragic story. He was abandoned by his family. And he even got to a place where he talked about spiritually, just he was searching. And all the way, this whole drive back to school, from time to time, we talked to him about Jesus. And he was totally into it. And Scott and I, we were trying to be good Samaritans. We got back to school. We actually found a place for him to stay. We helped him get some work. Spiritually, we continued to have conversations. He said he wanted to follow Jesus. So we even got to baptize this guy. And I'll tell you, I'll never forget that. But I'll also never forget that it was a few days later that he stole my friend's car. Took off, never saw him again. All right. So, do I regret those good deeds? And my answer would be absolutely not. Absolutely not. Yeah, I'm going to try to use a little more discernment from now on. But that is exactly who I want to be. I want to be someone who is rich in good deeds. I always want to err on that side. Eddie Yoon's a friend of mine. Eddie's been attending community for several years now. And I want you to hear his story. He's a smart business guy, works as a consultant with companies, helping them grow fast. He's also a contributor to the Wall Street Journal. But like the rest of us, Eddie's wealthy, and he knows it. But as you'll see, he's also becoming rich in good deeds.
What we really wanted to do was create a new kind of investment model that was in partnership with Emmanuel House and Rick Guzman, and in partnership with Community 412 and Kirsten Strand, to not only bring financial investment, but also relational investment, as well as community investment. Part of how this all came to be, I think, was the Holy Spirit really bringing it together in a couple of different events. We have 3 children, Mia, who's 9, Audrey is about to turn 7, and Luke is 5. And college is kind of front and center as one of the things that we have to prepare ourselves for, because it looks a little scary in about 10 years or so. And when we thought about that, we had another person talk to us about how real estate was actually quite a good place to save for college, which I hadn't considered before. And around the same time, Rick Guzman of Emmanuel House and Kirsten Strand of Community 412 were telling us about all the wonderful synergistic things that they were doing in East Aurora. So Kirsten certainly in the schools and having that local kingdom impact, and the reputation that she and her group has built has been stellar. Rick, through Emmanuel House, kind of buying homes and providing affordable rentals, but also training their renters in financial accounting and personal finance and saving, which allows them to take 18 months worth of savings while paying rent at the same time, and eventually putting their own down payment on a home in East Aurora, was pretty exciting. And when we put all of those things together, we kind of came to the conclusion, my wife Kristen and I, what if we took the same money that we were going to take for college savings and actually bought a house in East Aurora with Emmanuel House? And so that's what we did. For about the same amount of money that we would have saved normally for college, we were able to buy the house and renovate it, and with Rick's expertise, because I'm not a handyman at all, turn it around and put people in a rental situation there. And I think for him to know that we were looking at a 10 to 15 year horizon about when we would be looking for funds for college was a real comforting and stabilizing factor, in what made this kind of a win-win-win all the way around. I think the part for me that came naturally was knowing the population that they were reaching, both folks who are maybe more working class in East Aurora, but also the refugee population. And so as an immigrant from another country, and just knowing what my parents went through to come to another country and in a place where they didn't speak the language, to really build a home and set themselves up, I could very much relate to what they were going through. And I think remembering that it took a few helping hands from my parents to make it so that we could be in a position to do this. The math that God works with is not the math that we have, and that if you are open to it and you really kind of put your mind against how can I do a both and opportunity versus an either or, there are opportunities that God opens up that I think allow us to say, boy, I can be a good steward for my family and I can do good deeds at the same time. without having to choose either or, which I think is part of the magic of what God does.
That is just great stuff. Now, maybe though, some of you heard this and you thought to yourself, well, I'd love to do that, but I don't have that kind of cash where I can buy a house for somebody else. I mean, I'm just trying to keep my own mortgage paid. Totally understood. But let me offer you a process. And this is a process for you to begin to grow in becoming rich in good deeds. And the way I want to explain it, there are 3 levels by which we can grow in good deeds. And here they are. Level number 1. Level 1 is what I call acts of charity. Level 1 is when there's a need out there and it needs someone's immediate response. For example, if you work in a soup kitchen on Thanksgiving, that's an act of charity. You're responding to that need of hunger. Or if I donate clothing to a shelter, that's an act of charity. I'm responding to that need of clothing for someone. Or if I serve at the Christmas gift mart, that's an act of charity. The times we take up a benevolence offering on, when we have 5 Sunday months, that's an act of charity when you give. Level 1 is a good place to start. Just this week, we had some friends who, their son ended up in the hospital, and there was a financial need, so we gave a little bit of money. That was an act of charity. It doesn't require a long-term investment of time, resource, relationship, but it does meet a need. It's a great place to start, but not stop. That's level 1. Then there's level 2, okay? And level 2 is more about people. It's about ongoing, what we call people development. Level 2 is more relational. It's over a longer period of time. For example, if you choose to tutor or mentor a child, that's individual development, level 2. Or you choose to be a foster parent, that's individual development. Or let's say you decide, I'm going to spend time each week investing in a homeless people at a shelter. What that does, that requires a larger amount of time working with the same people over and over again consistently, and you begin to form relationships with those people. Level 2 is, yes, it's meeting a need, but it's also a longer-term relational investment in a person or in people, and that's level 2. Well, then we get to level 3. And level 3 is not just meeting a need, it's not just individual development, but it's really community development. What level 3 does, it offers you opportunities to bring about systemic change. For example, let's say, and we've had people in our church who sold their homes to relocate their entire family into a community that's in need so they can invest themselves in helping change that community. Or maybe you change jobs, and we've had people in our church do this, where they change jobs and they become teachers in a school district, in an under-resourced neighborhood to bring change in that community. Or let's say I start a new business, or I bring maybe a part of my business into a community to provide jobs, to lift people out of working class poverty. Those kind of good deeds not only are meeting a need, not only affect individual people, but the whole community, so they're level 3. And all 3 levels, please hear this, all 3 levels are essential expressions of loving God, of being rich in good deeds. And I think we can even go back to the Good Samaritan story. In the Good Samaritan story, he shows us a couple of these at least. Level 1, the Samaritan stopped, right? He stopped to help someone with an immediate need. This person probably would have died on the road there if they hadn't had offered help. Level 1, an act of charity. But level 2, the Samaritan not only took care of the man, but he also promised to come back to continue to take care of him and to meet his needs. At the end of the story, it kind of implies that there might have been this ongoing investment and this ongoing relationship between the Samaritan and this man that he helped. So it's kind of level 2, individual development. What about level 3? Well, Jesus doesn't get that far in the story, but level 3 would have come when, let's say the Samaritan said, okay, you know what? I have got to do something to help change that neighborhood between Jerusalem and Jericho. No one should have to live in fear like this. I'm going to start, for example, I'm going to start a program that'll be a neighborhood watch program to make sure there are volunteers that are walking the neighborhood every day and every night. I'm going to help change that community, that neighborhood. That would have been level 3, community development. Earlier, I mentioned that there was a woman that let a little old lady cut in line who turned out to win the largest single payout in lottery history. Remember that? The woman who gave up her spot was Mindy Crandall, and she had her 10-year-old daughter, Mallory, with her. Well, when reporters asked her how she felt, she said, well, everything happens for a reason. And you can't help but think, what's one good reason that beats out 590 million others? Well, it was Mindy's 10-year-old daughter, Mallory, who was in line with her mom, that spoke up and said to the reporter, said, sometimes It's better to be good than rich. I think we can learn a lot from that 10-year-old girl. Or maybe we even take it a step further and we say, you know what? To be good is actually to be rich. Remember what it says here in 1 Timothy. In 1 Timothy chapter 6, and we're going to keep coming back to this during this series. It says this, command those who are rich in this present world, that's us, not to be arrogant, nor to put their hope in wealth, which is so uncertain, but to put their hope in God, who richly provides everything for our enjoyment. And then command them to do good and to be rich in good deeds, to be generous and willing to share. And in this way, they'll lay up treasures for themselves as a firm foundation for the coming age, so they may take hold of the life that is truly life. Don't you want that? I know I do.